our workshop. Thank you very much. We're going to be talking about integrating generative AI into academic writing classrooms. My name is Jerry Talandis Jr., and I teach at the University of Toyama.
And I'm Theron Muller, and very recently moved to Waseda University Faculty of Human Sciences. Thank you for joining our very popular session, apparently.
Yeah, it's a hot topic, eh? Right? So this is not going to be a theoretical presentation of research results, although it is based on research that is now ongoing. It's based on a Kaken project that Theron and I are doing, and we are developing an app for use in the classroom to help give feedback on writing, and also a textbook. And we'll explain more about that later. But we're going to be focusing on what we've learned so far in terms of practical activities that teachers can use in the classroom for developing L2 writing skills. Okay? So that's kind of what you're getting into here. Here's a brief overview. We're going to be focusing first on some background and context, and trying to answer this question: why should we integrate generative AI into our writing classrooms? That's an important question to think about, I think. And after that, we'll cover three main objectives. The first would be to focus on how to teach prompt engineering in our classes. Next, we'll look at some a writing workflow that incorporates AI in it in ethical and productive ways. And finally, we're going to kind of bring that sort of workflow to life with a specific creative writing activity that students can use in order to engage with ethics and AI ethics. All right, so that's going to be it. Then at the end, we have some requests for help for our project. We're going to give you a menu of ways that you can get involved in our project and help out. So we're looking forward to it. Thanks again for coming.
All right, before Jerry gets to this question, he's a bit of a bulldozer when he gets started. We've had a few people coming late. We still have 1, 2, 3 chairs that are open. So if somebody would like to sit down, you're welcome to sit down. Okay? Okay. I am an English teacher, not a math teacher. I counted incorrectly. There is a 4th chair. So if somebody would like to take that chair, you're more than welcome to.
It gets hot after 3.
Yeah. It's really hard after 3. If you want to go get another one, you can get another chair. You're okay? All right. Okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Jerry.
So before we get into our thing, how about you guys? Why don't we take a few minutes and chat with the person next to you and talk about this question: why should we use AI in our writing classrooms? I'll give you about 3 minutes to have a chat, and then we'll ask for some answers. You're all excited and chatting about this topic. It's quite the hot topic, isn't it? So, any quick reactions? Why? What's your answer? What did you talk about? Anyone? Yes, hi.
If we don't introduce it, the students will introduce it themselves in a less than ethical way. Far less than ethical.
Not even less than ethical, less than skillful. So they don't know the effective ways to use it. So even the students who are trying to use it well need opportunities with guidance and peer interaction to actually learn to use it well.
There we go. Anyone else? Okay, well, there you go. So we have... Oh, yeah, come in.
It gives timely feedback to the
Yes.
students, whereas
Yeah.
just a teacher and for any kids, you can't give them feedback to their individual needs.
So
AI can
not only that, but so many other things that can be done with it. The affordances available through this technology are quite profound, and we got to be able to make use of it. Just like we use power tools all the time that are sort of dangerous and deadly, but we've developed safety guidelines, and we know how to use safety goggles and wear protective gear when we're using things, right? And same kind of thing. So Theron next is going to talk a little bit more about the context.
Yeah, just before we get into that, I think what the idea of giving timely feedback is, I think, a really important one. One of the things I'd say to my students is, it will never get tired of giving you feedback. If you ask your teacher to give you a feedback on your essay the 101st time, your teacher's going to say, no, had enough. But ChatGPT doesn't care. You can ask it as many times as you like. And before we get into this, Jerry's blocking it, but we did finally get the password for the grand ship. So if Jerry moves a little bit further over, the Saturday Wi-Fi is apparently the JOLT 2024. but if you go to the GS_conference, the password is grandship, hopefully all lowercase. I haven't tried it myself, and I'm not the IT tonto for the conference, so if it doesn't work, don't ask me to help you.
It works.
It works, great, wonderful, glad to hear it.
Right there.
Okay, so, I think we've all been through this before. I think most of us were around when the iPhone was invented and smartphones started to take things over, and there was this big, oh, they're gonna destroy the classroom, and then, oh no, how do we, the students have them anyway, how do we use them in the classroom kind of thing. And so, I think ChatGPT is going through these kind of well-worn avenues as well, not just generative AI in general is going through these well-worn avenues as well. You first have the shock and awe, suspicion, cheating, and bans. This is a relatively recent headline. And then I think it's always nice to look back at the past that we've traveled in the past. And so this is from Douglas Adams in 1999, talking about the internet and how anything that's invented after you're 30 is against the natural order of things and the beginning of the end of civilization as we know it. And then after it's been around for about 10 years, it's kind of all right, really. And so we're definitely not 10 years into the ChatGPT revolution or the generative AI revolution, but the reality is it's probably not going to be going away. And so that's where you get into the next step, which is the calls for action. So you've seen it, you've worked with it a little bit, and then you're starting to think, well, now we need to do something about it. And so these are some of the different calls for action. This isn't a kind of academic paper, but when I'm looking at this kind of thing, generally I refer to this kind of literature as editorializing, because it's still too early for people to have actually done research on the topic. It's so brand new, but it's people writing about this is how you should be doing it, or this is our advice for doing it. But it's still not necessarily research-based, because there hasn't been time to do that research. Like, that's what we're in the process of doing, and as people who have been through the research funding process knows, it doesn't turn on, it's not a ship that turns on a dime. You put in an application, and the next year, February, if you're really lucky, you get the funding, and then you can finally start from April. So,
I'm checking the suspicions and bans article.
all right, okay. And then this is some more evidence of those kind of guidelines that are coming out about how to integrate generative AI into the classroom. And then, hopefully, I think these cycles, as they kind of repeat, I think they're starting to get a little bit faster. And so I think we're starting to get into the last stage there, the practical solutions stage, thinking about that. And so we have the conference this weekend, this presentation included. These are some of the different presentations that are touching on the topic of generative AI in the classroom, thinking about how to practically integrate it into your classroom practice. And so this presentation, as Jerry's already kind of said, is focused on trying to be practical, giving you kind of the traditional, the more classic jolt. What are you going to be able to do in Monday in the classroom when your classes come around? Presentation style. So this is the, the slides are all available online, and we've also uploaded them to the conference site. So if you want to take pictures, you're more than welcome to. We're happy to be celebrities, but you don't necessarily need to. So this is the larger research project, and we just wanted to give you some background to that larger project before we get into kind of the specific practical applications that we're going to go through, that we're going to cover in more detail in this presentation. So first of all, there's kind of two tracks to the research as we've envisioned it. One track is developing the software that already exists called AutoPeer, that was originally developed by Philip McCarthy, who you can see in the lower right there, who's based at the UAE. And this is a free to download, free to use software that he uses with his students for writing research reports that gives formative feedback to students about their writing. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't change their writing. It says you might want to consider this, but then it's up to the students to actually change the writing. And this was all developed before the ChatGPT revolution came around. And it is continuing to be developed. You can can see he's got a team of people across the world, and he's got research students at the UAE who are producing research papers at the end of a 4 years of study, and that's kind of what he's tailored it to. And so the next challenge is to try to tailor it to other classrooms. And so where the project that we are working on with Jerry as the PI is trying to tailor that software to give feedback to students at the foundational level in Japan who aren't writing full research papers in our writing classrooms anyway. And so, like I said, there's kind of two different directions to the research that we wanted to talk about. One is the development of that software, which is kind of that blue circle on the right. And then the other thing we're trying to work on, the other part of that research plan, is to develop a textbook that integrates generative AI into the writing classroom. And kind of where they overlap is the plan is for AutoPeer to be developed to help students to generate prompts that they can then feed into generative AI. And the textbook is intended to help students to use prompts to use generative AI in the writing classroom ethically and effectively. So this is kind of the zoomed out view of the project. And this is the more zoomed in view. And just keep in mind right now, if you imagine the metaphor of time going from the left to the right, we're all the way on the left there. So we're just getting started with the project. The project was approved in April, and Jerry's still working on the ethical approval from the University of Toyama because they're very stubborn and they insist on everything being in Japanese, and so it's taking quite a bit of time. But what we'd like to start doing is collecting samples from students very soon and start moving toward the right on this metaphorical timescale. The top of the line is the development of that AutoPeer software, which is largely being driven by Philip McCarthy in the UAE, with us providing him data to customize it for the Japanese students. And then the bottom half of the line is the development of the textbook. And this is not a commercial presentation. There is no textbook that has been developed. We're in the process of working on it. So what we're going to share with you are some of the things that we've been trying to put together that we're intending to use to inform what's ultimately going to become the textbook. So these are kind of the foundations of the classroom practice that we're hoping to integrate into that textbook when the time comes. If the time comes, which it hopefully will. Okay, everybody with me? We're okay? All right. So this is kind of the conception of that textbook, 4 different levels, and the proposal is currently with Bloomsbury, and later on in the presentation there will be a chance for you to scan yet another QR code that will take you to a questionnaire, which is kind of intended for background marketing research, so if you're interested in contributing, you're more than welcome to, but this isn't a commercial presentation, so there's no commitment, no requirement for you to do that, but we'd be more than happy if you didn't mind helping us understand how much demand there might be. We kind of conceived the textbook as being in 4 different parts, and Jerry and I are currently working on the foundations part, which is getting students to go from the very foundational level, from sentence writing to paragraph writing, which I'm sure most of the people in the room would agree, at least when I've had students, when I've given students assignments and said write 250 words, they come back and they're like, I've never written that many words in my life. So they're much more used to translating sentences one at a time, not thinking about how to string sentences together. And then our plan is eventually to start to work on the lower intermediate textbook once the foundations level is out, and Philip McCarthy on the UAE side is starting from the advanced level, and then their plan is to work down to the upper intermediate level. So hopefully over time the whole thing will come together. Okay, and I think that's the end of my part, and I can pass it back to Jerry.
Thanks. All right, so our first objective is to focus on prompt engineering. If you've had any experience with this new technology, you know that writing a good prompt is really, really kind of the key to the whole thing. If your prompts are very well written and constructed, you're going to get a good result, and vice versa. All right. So how do you actually do that? Right. Okay. So I've been on this sort of journey, this quest to find the perfect prompt, right? And there's no shortage of online information. There's so many courses you know, Google has a course, and this organization has a course, and you can take these like 10-hour whatever certificate, there's all kinds of things. So what a lot of YouTubers have done, they've actually taken these and they try to condense it down. And if you search on YouTube, you can find dozens and dozens of things, and I've saved a whole bunch of them in this playlist, right? And so I was so excited by this one, and okay, so here are the essential elements. You need a clear task, a context, an exemplar, a persona, a format, and tone. Okay, easy, great. I then tried to teach that in my class, and the students are like, what? Exemplar, what? So, no, look, here's some examples. Now identify, where's the tone? What's the tone? What's the exemplar? And then, oh man, it was a drag. Okay, so I would say, this is totally fine from a teacher's perspective to get an understanding of the basic structure. But what I realized is this is more about productivity, right? For education, it's not necessary to have the perfect prompt. You just need to get started. And so what's the most easy way? Well, why don't we just have a chat with GPT and ask it what it needs. And so we'd like to demonstrate that if this works. This is a big risk, but we'll see. If it doesn't work, then, well, we'll deal with it. Okay, here we go. GPT, hello! All right, so we're in the presentation now, and we'd love for you to tell us, what do you need from students in order to create a really good prompt?
Hello everyone. To create a really good prompt, students need to focus on 3 key elements. 1. Clarity and specificity. The prompt should be clear and specific. This means avoiding vague or broad questions. Instead, they should aim to ask detailed questions that guide the AI to provide a more targeted response. 2. Stating a goal. It's important to include what they want to achieve with the prompt. This could be understanding a concept, exploring a topic, or solving a problem. A clear goal helps the AI understand the direction of the response. 3. Follow-up prompts. Encourage students to use follow-up prompts to dig deeper into the topic after the initial response. This helps to refine the conversation and gather more detailed information. Students can craft effective prompts that lead to more meaningful and informative AI interactions.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's basically what she said, or what he'd said, right? And so what you have here is a really simple starting point. You don't need to go through this whole intensive formula thing, although that's fine if you feel like you want to do that. The key point, I think, is this part here. When I tried using the prompts with students, they could copy and paste what I gave them, but then they were stuck. If you want the students to be empowered, this point needs to be emphasized. It's a dialogic process. And I think in terms of what we're trying to do for education, that's actually an advantage, because they have to keep working with it's a conversation with the knowledge, and to get what they want, they have to express themselves clearly, and that builds language skill and clear thinking. So it actually, this process of interacting and follow-up questions is quite actually pedagogically an advantage, I think. Okay, all right. So now, okay. So also, I just wanted to show that you can get really good information from the AI itself as a quick way to get started, right? Just to remind folks, that's a good place to start. Okay, how about an activity? All right, let's ask. Let's see if this works. All right, GPT, thank you for that. So could you give us a simple activity that students could use in class to learn how to develop a good prompt?
Certainly. Here's a simple classroom activity. Prompt workshop. Warm-up discussion, 5 minutes. Begin with a brief discussion on what makes a good prompt. Ask students for examples of questions they might ask an AI and what they hope to achieve with their questions. Group activity, writing prompts, 10 minutes. Divide the class into small groups. Give each group a topic related to your current lesson. Ask them to come up with a clear, specific prompt that includes a goal. For example, explain how photosynthesis works in plants. Sharing and feedback. Each group shares their prompt with the class. Encourage constructive feedback from peers on how to improve clarity and specificity. 4. Revise and refine. Allow groups time to refine their prompts based on the feedback they received. 5. AI practice. If you have access to an AI tool, let students test their prompts and observe the responses. This activity helps students understand the components of a good prompt through collaboration and hands-on practice.
All right, do you mind if I jump in real quick, Jerry?
Please, go ahead.
All right, so this is an excellent demonstration, I think, of both some of the advantages to talking to AI to get it to demonstrate these kinds of things to students, and also some of the issues that you could run into. We practiced this earlier and before lunch, and this 3-step process ended up becoming 5 steps, and Jerry very carefully said, no, 3. And then, I don't know if you were trying to follow along here, but we got to this step here, and the plan was for it to be give students a vague prompt, and then the students work on trying to make the prompt more specific, and then it goes from there to us having you do a discussion about, and then the students have this kind of discussion of going from the vague to the more specific prompt of what worked, what didn't, why are they important, and then have the teacher do some showcase of a few examples. And you see Jerry was kind of nervously flicking through the slides because the AI was saying something a little bit different from what was up here. So he did do this, he can talk about it more, but he did do this with his students. He did this demonstration with his students. So he said the students felt like they were like in a classroom in the future, because he was talking to a computer and they could hear the computer talking and they could kind of get the feedback.
ALT.
And he had to set that up before the classroom to make sure that it went well. And thankfully, it didn't go off the rails in the classroom, but in the presentation, I wouldn't say she went off the rails, but she didn't stay within the bumpers that we had kind of set up.
That's a teaching moment. So when you're working with the AI like this, you never know what you're gonna get. It's like a box of chocolates.
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
So now I think I'll pass it back to you, Jerry.
Yeah, so basically that's the activity. So here's the thing, you ask the AI because it's quick and convenient, but you don't just accept it, you have to think it through, right? That's the key point with working with AI, is don't just be passive, it's great, it's perfect, you have to consciously think about it. So why don't we take a few minutes, you saw the activity, and now talk about it. Would you use that in your classroom? Could you use, if you did, would you make any changes? Anything, okay? I'll give you a few minutes. Let's have a chat here. Time for a few comments. Does anyone want to talk about what they talked about? Or
You've only got yourselves to blame for this comment because you did start with Douglas Adams. What you just brought there about refining your prompts has really made me appreciate him even more when you think of the answer 42, because it came from a really bad prompt.
Oh, yeah.
So you should actually use that as part of your slides. What's the answer to life, the universe, and everything? They didn't follow your advice, but he came up with this idea of prompts being important 20 years ago, 30 years ago when he was writing The Hitchhikers.
amazing, huh?
Yeah, very well put. I think I'm the one that pushed, I'm the one that's read Douglas Adams. I'm the one that pushed Jerry and put the quote in. He's the one that uses Mac's slides, so I couldn't touch it because I run Linux. So Mac's slides is only compatible with Mac's. So
Thank you very much.
Nice comment.
Any things like about that activity? Is that something you might consider, or is that completely no thank you? But whatever, as long as we just want to say that you don't have to be searching everywhere. You can start with the AI, and you can actually get good information, and then you critically assess it. Is this useful or not?
And I think that's part of the classroom process that we're going to go through, is actually us having the students assess the AI. And so what they present to you isn't just their writing, but they present to you their assessment of the AI. Before we go on, did anybody want to add anything else? Sure.
Well, this might open a bit of a Pandora's box, but I was thinking in my classroom with a prompt like that, or with a topic like that, about writing about your own family, something that is known only to you, that ChatGPT can figure out from a large language model. at least my students, I think, might be more likely to use AI translation, like to write out what they want to say in Japanese first and then translate that into English, which is going to require a whole other skill set to be able to analyze that output and do something useful with
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I think some of the things that we're gonna be talking about, like the critically assessing, and then one of the things that Jerry tells his students pretty regularly is, if I gave you a vocabulary quiz on what you just gave me, would you pass that vocabulary quiz? Like, that's the kind of thing that if they're giving you the translated output, you could probably use some of those same tools to help steer them. And I think one of the activities that we have coming will hopefully preempt that a little bit, because it's getting the AI to help them to write rather than writing on their behalf.
What a
So
nice segue. Perfect.
now it's back to me. All right. So, this is kind of, like I said before, some of the foundations that we've started to build, thinking about moving into that textbook project that we'll hopefully be working on in the near future. And this cycle is largely a brainchild of conversations that Jerry and I have had, but it's been largely driven in the classroom by Jerry, who's been teaching more writing than I have of late. So the idea is this kind of 3-class structure where, kind of like a typical, I assume you all have experience of teaching writing, and so kind of typical, at least in my mind, to a writing classroom, you introduce the students to the genre, you give them kind of an example, you give them a chance to think about its characteristics, and then you go to, okay, now it's time for you to do the writing, and then they try to kind of reenact that genre in their own words. Then you move into class 2, and we're not going to focus a lot on class 2 because class 2 ends up looking like a traditional writing classroom. We don't plan to incorporate generative AI in that. The students are giving feedback on one another's writing rather than going to the generative AI to get feedback. Excuse me. I get paranoid having to cough anymore. Historical reasons. And then we get to class 3, which is where we bring the generative AI back into the classroom process, and students make another revision using the generative AI, and then addressing some of those things about the students critiquing the AI rather than just blindly following it. So, what we wanted to do is we wanted to show you what this looks like from the teacher's perspective as the students are producing assignments, and then we wanted to go through the steps in a lot of detail. So this is the first class, the student first draft. Please read it and then nod when you're finished reading. Okay, I'm seeing some heads bobbing, so thank you very much. If you're not finished, I mean, don't worry about it too much. You can see that there's all kinds of errors in there, and it's really short, and it's not really entirely clear what the student's trying to say. They have a topic, but it's kind of, themes aren't necessarily going together very, very much. And so now we're going to skip ahead to class 3, which is when the students are getting some feedback from the generative AI to improve their writing. And so that's the feedback they get. So please read that again and then nod when you're finished reading. Okay, I see some heads bobbing, so I think hopefully I can move on. If you haven't quite finished reading yet, the slides are all online, so you can visit them later. And so then what I'm going to go to next is the final revision that the student submits after getting the feedback and then working with the AI on the assignment. And then once again, please just read that and then nod when you're finished reading.
Yes. So this is the revision that GPT makes based on its own feedback.
Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up.
See, that's, so, no. So the student gives they get the feedback, and then they get a revision from GPT based on that advice, and then this is what GPT gives back to the student.
Thank you for rescuing me, Jerry. I got a little bit ahead of myself here. Just nod when you're finished reading. Okay, I think people get the point, right? Like, this is not what the student said at all. This is all GPT. Like, those black characters are the original, and then the purple is stuff that was added. And so, one of the things that Jerry says to the students is, if like I said before, if you give this to me and I gave you a vocabulary quiz based on what you gave me, could you pass the vocabulary quiz? And so, then the next step is, the student edits this to fit their understanding, their vocabulary. So they look at this and they're like, what do I like, what do I not like, and then how do I make this so that it's more mine? And this is the student's version. And don't worry about reading this one, I'm going to skip to the next one, because this shows you what the student changed to get to their version. So go ahead and read that and then nod when you're finished. I see some nodding. I see other people putting glasses on. So, on the right there, you can see that the student deleted significant chunks of text that they didn't really understand. It was kind of too much for them. In order to try to make it simpler, the word count isn't on this one. The word count's over here. So it ended up, if we just walk through it really quickly, it went from 40 words to 73 words, and then back down to 60 words. So the student has cut back what the generative AI produced. And then now what we'd like to do is get into the actual lesson process. If I can keep this all straight in my head, I'm not going to get ahead of myself here. So, like I said before, we kind of start with kind of traditional writing, right? You get the model text, show them an example of a genre, have them choose a suitable topic to write their own thing, and then they do this guided writing task, which we'll get into in more detail, and then the generative AI compiles the students' kind of guided writing into a first draft, which looks a bit different from that first draft that I showed you before, because the AI tends to take out a lot of the errors that students make. So this is kind of, like I said, this isn't a commercial presentation, but this is kind of a mock-up of the textbook proposal that we put into Bloomsbury. And so you can see here, we're teaching story, and then we have an example of a story. There's a lot of text on the slides. We don't expect you to read it all. There's not going to be a quiz afterwards, so please don't worry about trying to read it. But the idea is to give the students the example, and then they can discuss some different questions, so it's kind of comprehension is involved here. And then in the next activity, they're going to write a story with the AI. And so the key point is they get this prompt here. So they're saying they want to write this paragraph about some theme, and then they're asking the AI to ask them questions that follow that kind of story structure. And so they drop this in, and then they get questions, which is here. So they drop that in, and then they get these questions, and then they answer these questions kind of one at a time. And then once they've answered a certain number of questions, the AI kind of compiles their answers together into a text. And that kind of answers what you said, students writing about their families. They're the ones that are providing some input in order to put together the story.
So this way, it's the students writing, just being guided by the AI. So it's just based on the requirements of the task.
So instead of, my teacher told me to write a 200 to 300 word essay, give me a 200 to 300 word essay, it's ask me questions to help me write this. And so at the end of this process, they get kind of an output that's based on what their answers were to the generative AI, and then that's kind of the end of this first cycle. And then class 2, like I said before, we go through kind of a more traditional writing classroom, so the students are giving one another feedback. Since this is a workshop that's concentrating on generative AI in the classroom, we're purposely not going to spend a lot of time on this. If somebody really wants to talk about how to do a traditional writing classroom, then we're more than happy to address that in the comment time, but I hope everybody kind of has an image of how you do kind of more traditional writing instruction in the classroom. So we're going to kind of go from here on to slide 3. And then when we get to slide 3, students have a second draft that's based on the feedback they got from their peers. And then they start with that at the beginning of class 3. And they submit their draft to the generative AI tool for feedback, which is that example that I showed you before, that feedback they got from the generative AI. And then this part here is really important. They compare the generative AI revision with their own draft from here. And then they decide what they're going to implement. They decide what bits they want to include, what bits they would prefer to leave out. And then they create that final version, which I showed you an example of. And then that's kind of the end of the cycle. And so here's this kind of mock-up of the textbook example, where they get this prompt, and then, research agrees with him, but this is also Jerry's preference is to try to get students to write stuff out by hand, because what research says is typing doesn't necessarily get it into your brain. Writing it out by hand helps to get it into your brain. So Jerry likes to have the students write it out or summarize the key points, kind of synthesize the feedback from the generative AI. And then there's some questions that are asked. And, vocabulary, grammar, clarity, I think those are pretty straightforward. I think the important one is voice. Is this yours? Is this your story? Was it written in my voice? Do you agree or disagree? I think that's something that's important to get students to start to think about, because otherwise, when I have students write reflections, like I can tell who popped it into GPT and who actually tried to write something for themselves. And so, I jumped 2 slides. So there you go, that's kind of...
If you ask your students this, you'll be surprised how many agree and how many disagree. I found it a mix. It's actually very interesting, and their comments are instructive. So if you ever do this type of activity, I would recommend at least asking the students this after they produce some content with the AI's help. What do they think about that? And then have that as a source of discussion and reflection. I think that's really important.
Thank you, Jerry.
One question.
Yeah, sure, please.
Have you ever analyzed how students devise AI-generated revision?
Have we actually started to research that? It's just beginning,
Yeah,
so that's part of what
We're
we're...
waiting for the AI ethics people to say
Maybe that's
we
something
can
to do
start.
with agreement and disagreement.
Yes,
Because
yes.
when I do with AI,
Yeah.
I feel they are too detailed or too many examples. I'm not quite sure this is just my voice or majority of
That's right.
Japanese people. We tend to go very simple way in writing.
Yes,
When you
yes.
read newspaper or something,
That's
you may feel, what are the concrete examples
That's right.
or what else people are saying or whatever. But I guess that, this is pure guess, something to do with our culture of writing, not too much details, not so many reasons, or so unless Japanese learners get into English writing system or genre of different English writings, they may feel a little bit uneasy with generative AI's responses.
That's why it's so important, I think, to have them talk about it and reflect on it critically and not just accept it, so that could be something they could talk about.
But actually that's really necessary for Japanese learners.
Yes.
So introspectively, learners try to probably develop their ways of writing by corresponding with generative AI. And I think that's very, very important
Yeah.
because teachers can give very limited feedback, but generative AI gives tons of feedback
That's right.
promptly
That's right.
and endlessly,
That's right.
individually.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and
So
I think,
that's perfect.
yeah, and that's an excellent segue to what I was looking forward to sharing next, is that we do not plan to make a 3-class textbook. The idea is to use this kind of 3-class pattern recursively. And so what happens is, in the 3rd class, when the students are interacting with the generative AI, it's giving them examples of how to give feedback. And then the next time around, when they go through the next 3 classes, they can use those examples when they're giving feedback to their peers
In the second class, that's right.
in the second time around, and the 3rd time around, and the 4th time around. So the idea is, you can have the students might say something like, the AI said you might want to try, and I didn't realize that was one way to make a suggestion in English, and so the next time they might try to use that with their partners. So it's kind of another way for them to get what Tim Murphy calls near-peer role modeling, but from a kind of more developed, hopefully more developed kind of English pattern than what they might get from their actual peers when they're in the classroom. And Jerry's cued here because he's ready to do his part, so I'll pass it back to him.
Thank you very much. So, all right, so our third objective is to actually, so we've given you the sort of 3-class structure. Now let's kind of bring that to life with a specific activity that you might want to use. And this one is creative writing. That's one of the key genres of academic writing. And so the idea is for students to write a fictional story that dramatizes an AI ethical issue, plagiarism or bias or over-dependency. There's a whole litany, a long list of issues that we have to deal with. So instead of I've tried this. I tried to make a really simple list. Do this, don't do this, right? And that's fine, but it's like, it's in one ear out the other. So I'm looking for a more, like a deeper way and why not use creativity? When people are using their creative minds and their imaginations, then they're engaging with something at a much deeper, more profound level. And that's kind of what I'm aiming for here with this activity. So the goal is to write a 5-paragraph essay that dramatizes the issue, okay? And each paragraph follows the story arc that we study, right? And the rationale is to make these issues tangible and real through activating creativity, right? And I think that's a really good way to encourage critical reflection and just awareness of what you need to be thinking of when you're using this powerful technology. To get started, to do this activity in this way that I'll present it, you need some information input. So I've created short blurbs about a number of different issues that I wanted to cover. I have a short model story, model essay. I focused on points that I want students to focus on. I wanted to get students to improve upon these points. And I've had to come up with some prompts. You might need some prompts to get the things started. I find it's really easy if you give them the prompt to get started, and that kind of facilitates the classroom management, and then they can go from there, right? So the easiest way to me to show it is actually to take you to the Moodle, all right? So we use Moodle here, and so I've actually set this up, and now we're I'd just like to roll through this with you guys. Really don't have to read all this, okay? I just want to take you through the sort of general structure and let you know what we're doing, and you don't have to read all this, or if you want to read it, let me know. I can help you access this later, okay?
So,
yeah.
just before you keep going, there's one chair that opens, so if somebody who's standing up wants to have a seat, you're more than welcome to have a seat.
So in the first class, I wanted to introduce information about AI and ethics. So I chose the jigsaw reading task. You guys familiar with that? Each student has a short blurb, they have to read it, and then without looking at it, they have to summarize it to a classmate. It's a classic technique, task-based learning technique. It works really well. I got these blurbs from this one. Okay, so I have the issues here. You can see they're very short because I don't need need to spend too much time on it. But this can be adapted any way you like, and these sources of information can come from wherever you want, right? So we're looking at things like overdependence, plagiarism, lack of originality, misuse of information, privacy, fairness and access. These are all big deals, right? Ethical use for testing, understanding the limits of AI, right? So these are all big time important things to consider. So doing it with students in a real academic way it's kind of a non-starter, at least for my students. So by making this a story, that kind of helps a lot, all right? So what they do is we study the model, okay? So here's the model, and we go through it as I showed you earlier, okay? And then they discuss it. It's the same as before. We teach the structure, okay? The basic story arc. And then after that, we go through the first draft guided writing activity. So here's the prompt. So the students, all they have to do is copy this prompt and then insert their issue. In this particular class, I had 8 students. It's a small group, level 2 writing course, so I had only 8 students, so I assigned a specific issue to each student. But of course, they can choose their issue from a list of items or whatever you want, right? That could be adapted easily. So this gives the AI clear directions on what to do. And then for homework, they have to write their first draft. Okay, and then we go through the process. Then the second class is teaching, doing a noticing task where we give the model from the first class, the same as before. So they have to pair read this aloud. Then they have to read a quote, improved version. And they have to notice the differences. So this is a typical traditional writing activity. And so right here, it's all set up for them to kind of see that the improved version has clear dialogue, that the characters are actually speaking to each other. So this is actually a really good way to go about it. You have to think, what does this person say in this moment? And the people have to think about that. So that actually brings up language skill in a way, right? So that's kind of neat. You have to write about speaking, so in a sense you're doing 2 skills there. And then, of course, then we do some exercises to teach about how to write dialogue. The punctuation involved, the capitalization, the dialogue tags, right? Basic ones. He said, she said, he smiled, he laughed, he whispered, right? There's all kinds of different tags, and so this is a kind of vocabulary input step, right? So you want to spend time doing that. Another point I found that really brings stories to life is more descriptive language, right? So if you're using adjectives to create vivid images, I try to tell the readers, you're an artist now. You're painting pictures in the reader's mind. You don't have ink, you have adjectives and adverbs, right? You have this sort of descriptive images, the icy wind whipped across the street, you know, whatever, right? So you want to kind of make it more lively like that, okay? Then we have some short exercises to go through these points. Right? These can be adapted as you like and you have time for. And then the peer feedback, where the students have now a rubric that guides them through the peer feedback process. This is very helpful. Rubrics are great, and you can use the AI to help generate a first draft of that, and then you can then adapt it as you need it. So this is a very, very helpful step because it gives students a structure to follow when they're reading each other's essays. So I have students work in pairs, and they focus on one student at a time. They read their story aloud, and then they give each other comments about this. Right? So they're going through aspects like the structure, the dialogue, does it meet all these points, yes or no? Does it? So these are connected to the points of improvement, right? You see that? So this really, highly recommend it. Rubrics are very nice, right? Very good way. Okay? So then also, because I want them to use English as much as possible, I spend a little time giving them some kind of starting phrases they can use to introduce different points of feedback. So it's basically a course of feedback literacy, right? So we're teaching how to give feedback and how to do it. That's a difficult thing with, peer feedback is a tried and true excellent approach for many good reasons, but it's also, you have to work at it and teach it, so that's kind of one of the main aims of this approach, this activity, is to build in this sort of thing. Okay? So then there you go. So then they write their second draft. So that's their second class. They've gotten feedback and they can talk to each other about the dialogue ideas. When I watch my students doing this, they're giving each other tips. Oh, he should say this, or he should say that, or maybe they could say this. So they're kind of working together on a person's paper. So they're kind of getting peer support as they write their dialogue. So that's a very effective technique, I found.
And then before he goes into class 3, I just want to say, if you're wondering where the generative AI is in this, it isn't there. So this is the class 2 of that 3-class cycle
That's right.
we were discussing, and so this is kind of
That's right.
more traditional writing,
Yeah.
teaching, getting the students to engage with one another and give peer-fed feedback.
And that's by design, because I don't think it's necessary to give your life over to the machine, that I want to find a way to balance it so that you're working with the technology as a collaborative partner and that there's a balance there. And so this whole lesson is, there's no real AI in it, although they could if they needed it for some reason. But that the basic thing is that it's developing giving time for students to work together to give each other feedback. And that way they're helping someone and helping themselves at the same time. And then we can, now we're set up, now we can go to the GAI, right? The ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever tool you'd like to use, right? So the warm-up is that they read their stories, then they paste in the prompt like we showed before, they get the feedback from the AI, okay? And then they go through it, then they have a group discussion, right? So I give them phrases for like, one thing they could talk about is some surprising bit of advice. What was surprising or unusual? One suggestion I didn't expect was something. Another one, do you agree? Key point. Do you agree? Do you disagree with the suggestion? Is it too difficult? Sometimes students notice the AI misinterprets what they wanted and it takes them in this crazy direction. That's really needs to be, you got to be on that, right? You can't just accept that, right? And what changes do you plan to make? When I watch my students talking to each other like this, and they're saying, well, the AI said this, but I don't know, maybe I'm not going to do that, but this is a really good idea, I think I'll do that. They're making conscious choices in the moment, and that's good. I think that's helpful, right? So they're actually getting a lot of benefit from that process, and I think it can be very educational. Then we go through the step of getting the revision of their essay based on the advice that the AI gave. And then they have to go through and look at the differences. So here's my second draft. Here's the AI revision of my second draft. What do you think? Right? 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 It's you got to think about that, and you have to talk about it in groups. What are the most notable changes that the AI made? What do you want to keep, and which parts do you think are better? Which of your parts are better than the AI, right? So all of this is really, really important. It's done collaboratively in the class, and so we're working students with the technology together in a clear, sort of open way, right? So then they have to give out they have to do their final draft, and they have it typed up. It's easier to work text with the typing stuff, but for me, it's just I just love writing. So for the final draft, I have them handwrite their essay, and that's what I get from the student because I like handwriting. I don't want to lose it, right? I like books. I like handwriting, and it's just me maybe. But I think it's really appealing to have that hand feeling of me writing clean, correct English that I was helped to develop, but it's the students are writing that. Okay, so that's basically the activity.
Go down one more.
Yeah.
Keep going. There you go. And then you can see
Oh, yes.
the process starts again from class 1 with a new theme, and kind of go through that same kind of 3-cycle process again. So
We just finished that. That's a problem solution essay. Okay, same basic structure. So this can be applied to any genre, traditional genre, problem solution, like a process writing, whatever, expository writing, any kind of thing. Okay. All right. Good.
Oh, you did it, well done, good job, Jeremy. Okay, so the last time we did one of these TNT workshops, we produced 30 copies and 9 people showed up. So this time we made 20 copies and we've been blessed by far more interest in the workshop than we ever imagined. So if you've downloaded the version that is uploaded to Cvent, at the end of the file there are several pages basically that are this with the student's first draft on the left and the student's final draft on the right. And our plan was to pass these out and to have you discuss them in small groups and think about what your opinions of them were. And we do have 20 physical pieces of paper. So for those of you that need a physical piece of paper, we do have some available, but we're going to have to ask you to politely share with someone sitting nearby. So I will give you the option. Why don't I give one here? Why don't I give one here?
Before we go into the discussion, can I quickly ask you about your assessment scheme for
Yes.
this type of class? How would you grade the products? How would you, go through the process of student interaction with generative AI? Sometimes students might turn in a perfectly written paragraph that might be completely written by generative AI.
That's a great question, and I'm actually thinking about that right now. So I don't have a final definitive answer, but I can give you some ideas that I'm working on right now. So one thing is that as they go through it,
Sure, why don't you talk to everybody?
Okay, so, sorry, the question was, how do you assess this, right? Well, I think assessment is a very personal thing, and then you all have your own ways of going about that. I also haven't thought it completely through yet. We're just kind of working on this, but it is something that I have some ideas on. So one thing is focusing on the process, and like I'm considering, for example, not just like we did cover points of improvement. So that's one thing that I want them to do. I want them to be able to rewrite and update things based on, like I can give them something and then improve it. Another way would be just to memorize their essay and write the whole thing. And then can they write the whole thing? I mean, that's pretty draconian, but that could work. I've tried that in the past and it's actually possible. You just memorize the essay if it's not too long, and they have to actually read it and write it, and then you can grade it that way.
Okay.
So there's various ways, looking at the process, also trying to produce a final product, and also maybe a more reflective approach where they talk about what they learned throughout the process of writing something.
The help with GPT and the students.
That's something I gotta work on.
It's not just GPT.
Generative AI to grade the students.
No, I haven't.
The first
That's
one is
possible.
the
That's
student-
totally
the
possible,
GPT
but I
asked them
haven't
questions.
gotten that far yet. Yeah, I'm not sure about that yet. I'm not sure.
So that's the question, they answer the question.
I kind of asked this to Theron and he said to pass on to you.
The
And
final
with the students
draft
getting
is.
peer feedback, which is great,
Fix it.
obviously the generative AI
The
stuff,
final one.
does that mean they're not using the more traditional diagnostic tools,
I'll go
like
back.
spell
I'll show you.
checker, Grammarly, Paperwriter, those kind of things? Non-AI?
I think that's a question of your workflow, how you actually go about it, right? So the way I'm running it here, that's not really necessary because the AI sort of polishes all that out, there's the process of it. But if you have them write something on a Google Doc first and then paste it in, then of course you could have all of the access to all of those tools in a different way. So I would say that would be a product of the way you go about it.
Okay.
Some people might want to just write it all by hand too, not have any typing at all too, right? So depends on how you go about it.
I have 6 more physical pieces of paper, so if anybody would like some more. Could you pass that one? Please, thank you. Anybody else like a physical piece of paper? Over. And then I got 2. One for you and then one for the lady. Please. Okay, I have 2 more physical pieces of paper. Okay. These are not all the same. We prepared 3 different ones. We were thinking that we would have 12 people and we would have them in different groups. So you may have a different one from somebody sitting next to you. I have 1 more physical piece of paper. Would anybody like the last one? Yeah. Sure, of course. Okay, so I've had a question about what exactly you're looking at that I'd like to answer really quickly here. So I want to go back to here. The first draft is the end of this conversation. So the student says to GPT, please ask me some questions, and then GPT asks a series of questions, and then GPT takes the student's answers to those questions, puts them together into an essay. So what you're not seeing are the spelling checks, the punctuation, or the spelling errors, the punctuation errors, the capitalization errors that students would usually make if you just told them write this out by yourself. Because they've answered GPT, and then GPT's kind of compiled it for them. So there's already been what Jerry just answered the question about spell check and Grammarly and that kind of thing. There's already been that kind of smoothing out of the text. So the first draft may look much better than you would expect your students to produce. Please don't be surprised by that. His students are not supernatural. It's just this is the process that we've gone through for these examples. And then the final version is yeah, so let me see, I can't remember if we had an example of the final version. The final version, yeah, we do. The final version is this one, basically, where it's, please change it for me, make it better for me, and GPT basically does everything. But then we say to the students, okay, we'll pull that back a little bit, make sure that it's in your voice. So the final version that you're looking at isn't this. The final version you're looking at is this, the one that the student submitted. And the students are also asked to do that kind of critical reflection thing. What is different? What do I agree with? What do I not agree with? That we didn't prepare. We didn't give that to you here. So you just have the original and then the final. And we've only got about 20 minutes left. So we really did want to open this up for questions, and it's obvious there's a lot of interest. So in the interests of time, we'd like to give you, say, 3 or 4 minutes to look at these, think about some differences, discuss them, and then when we get to 2:15, we'll try to leave the last 15 minutes for discussion. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah? So please go ahead, please discuss the...
And to give you a present of an integrated way, not a way, not the way, of course, and to help you think about this and how it's actually going to work out in your class, in your teaching practice, with your style of approach, right? So basically, that is, we got the sign, we got to wrap it up. So what we'd like to do is just talk about a few ways that you can help our project, okay? So we got this Cocking grant, we started in April, and it's just getting rolling. If you scan this code, you can access a quick marketing survey that will take you about 5 to 10 minutes to fill out. If you teach writing, or if you know of people at your institution who teach writing or what courses are offered, this would be immensely helpful. It's a quick marketing survey. You can read the whole series proposal, and then you can comment on it. And this feedback will be read by the people at Bloomsbury, and it's going to be used to help support our project. It's now currently going out for review. If you want to be a reviewer of this series, that would entail reading the full thing and then filling out a feedback form. You have about 3 weeks to do that. So if you teach writing, you teach here and you're interested in that, please contact me, let me know, and I can get you in touch with the Bloomsbury rep, and then he'll send you the information.
Yeah, just to be clear, we're talking about two different things. So there's a textbook marketing survey where we're just trying to get a picture of what courses this textbook could potentially be used for. And the idea is when our representative takes it to the Bloomsbury board of directors, they can say, look at these 150 courses, like there's plenty of places where this could be used, and then that helps open up the pocketbook and get the process rolling. Then there's also a proposal that we've submitted that's going out to reviewers, and if you're interested in being a proposal reviewer, that's separate from the marketing survey. You can contact Jerry or me to indicate your interest. And then go ahead, Jerry.
And if you're interested in working with us on developing AutoPeer, we're going to be first collecting anonymized student writing samples. So if you're interested in submitting some of that from your students, I have a whole system of how to do that securely and anonymously. And then later on down the line, once the AutoPeer has been trained, to work with students in this country. There'll be a beta testing phase as well, so that will be sort of the next phase of the research. So this will all be happening over the next 2.5 years. Okay. So with that, we've got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, so just a second here, we're not quite done. So,
Forgot the last one. Yes, sorry, I forgot that last one.
so eventually, hopefully there will be a textbook, and hopefully this will be converted into some form of a commercial presentation. So if you're interested in trialing the textbook in your classes, which would be in not the far, far future, but not in the coming year by any means, it would probably be
Maybe 2 years.
in 2 or 3 years' time, then that's another option. Our email addresses are on the screen, and then we
Is
both
the
have.
textbook going to be published in paper format?
Yes.
Yes, the intention is for Bloomsbury to publish the textbook.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So our email addresses are on the screen, and we both have newly minted business cards. If you'd like to exchange business cards, let us know. And then our last slides are the references. So I'll go back to the email addresses in case anybody needs to get hold of those. We have just under 5 minutes left. Is the next presenter here?
Under 5 minutes.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have anything else they want to say? Any other questions or comments?
We really appreciate your coming. Thank you very much, and I hope it's been helpful. So, arigatou gozaimasu.
I'm going to start with the most usage, and I'm going to work backwards. In any capacity, who uses AI on a daily basis? Could you please raise your hand? Daily basis? Oh, wow. Okay, who uses AI, say, occasionally once or twice a week? Okay, who uses it like once or twice a semester? Okay, wow, good, wow. Okay. So this room is advanced. We'll call it advanced. Anybody got a favorite AI? Who's using OpenAI's, who pays for AI? You're paying for the frontier model. Oh, wow, okay. Let's just get a few here. Who's using OpenAI? Who's using Gemini? You can leave now. Okay. Who's using Meta maybe, or Claude? Who's using Claude? Okay. Who's using multiple AIs? Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. All right. All right. Let's begin. I'm gonna close the door because it's not my people are gonna. Can they get in? Alright, this is 45 minutes. I've got too much material, but since you guys are advanced, I'm just going to go through the early stuff very quickly, and we'll stick with the quantification, or how I go about quantifying speaking. Please stop me if you have questions. We'll address them as we go, because we probably will run out of time and not be able to address them at the very end. I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes. 3 times, and hopefully this presentation is parsed into 3 segments. We're going to make the first segment a quick one. Leveraging AI to quantify comprehensibility. One last hands up. Comprehensibility. Does anyone understand the technical term or how comprehensibility is used in the literature? Okay, good. Couple. All right. So I'll spend a little bit more time on the back half of this presentation. So here's a small menu, State of AI. I'm going to go through this quickly. It's always good to get a little overview. I know you guys are experts on this, but it's nice to remind ourselves how far we've come in the last 2 years. How to objectively assess speaking skills, comprehensibility scores, what they mean, and how we can then use these comprehensibility scores to objectively quantify speaking skills of our students. So there's a lot of models, and everyone is using different models and stuff, but honestly, it's a bit of a horse race, and I'm just going to focus on OpenAI's, the frontier model. They have O1 Mini, or O1 Preview. The O1 Preview is out, but it has a lot of reasoning skills. Honestly, it's not really cleaned yet, in my opinion. but the 4.0 model is probably the paid frontier model right now. Things change so quickly, maybe it changed this morning, never know. But I'm just going to be dealing with GPT 4.0, but honestly, if you use any of the other ones, they're all the same. One gets a couple of features, the other companies see it, and then they built that into their own. So this presentation is not AI or 4.0 specific, but I will be using 4.0 because that's what I'm most familiar with. Quickly, very quickly, if just to really stress how far we've come, it's been 2 years since the initial release. They had 3.5 turbo, they introduced 4, there was an OS mobile thing, app, and then they added additional multimodal capabilities with text, image, and audio still in 2023. And then there was image generation added. And then in 2024, just of this year, they launched 4.0. They had advanced multimodal support in May. And then they added Mini. What Minis do is they basically reduce the model for speed with keeping essentially the power of the original model, and they just streamline it and they optimize it. So if you see Mini, don't think that it's like an inferior model. A Mini model is actually optimized and it retains all of the power of the original initial release, but it's just improved. And they call it Mini because it's streamlined and it's lightweight, but it has all the power of the original one. And then they came out with the 01 preview, and it's in the preview mode because 2 things to say about 01. It does reasoning, and you have to wait like 10 to 30 seconds or so. But honestly, that's still being tweaked. However, if you're having trouble, doing complex mathematical calculations, then you might want to go into heavy reasoning. But honestly, the 4.0 is really good. It's amazing compared to the 3.5. And that was only 2 years ago when the initial release had come out. And now there's another anticipated update in next month. I just want to frame a little bit because it's fun sometimes to see the craziness and we forget how we got here. But do you remember the Turing test? The Turing test is, there was a study conducted by researchers in California, San Diego. 4.0 was identified as a human 54% of the time for a 5-minute conversation. It used to be the Turing test was the standard. Nobody even talks about the Turing test. They're talking about consciousness. Are you kidding me? Okay, we can leave consciousness aside, but the Turing test, they blew by the Turing tests like about this year, basically. And over half of humans will claim that they don't know if it's a human or an AI. And this is just going to get more and more, the AI models are going to get more and more sophisticated as we move forward. Actually, some of you may have seen this, but the reverse Turing test, it's just fun. We'll spend a minute on this. There's a little video, it's a fun video. The reverse Turing test is when AI models are in a simulation and there's one human. So there's a bunch of AIs, there's one human, and the AIs are tasked to identify who is the human in the group. Has anyone seen this before? Okay, well I'll show the video. The AI agents analyze dialogue, basically because we're talking to each other, to determine who the participant is, which participant is human. Notably, the AI model successfully identified the human based on conversational nuances. And why is this interesting? Or it's not really important, but it's quite interesting. The experiment highlights AI's growing proficiency in detecting human behavior patterns. So they can find us probably more than we can determine which one they are. So it's actually called a reverse Turing test. So it's only about just under a minute. And let's see if this works. Yeah, okay, good.
If that's fed back into the training data, then they could become more human as well. Right?
Well, you know it. Let's.
Ticket. Thank you. A group ticket.
This is a short video.
AIs that present as famous personalities. Let's see. We have Aristotle, Amadeus Mozart, Leonardo da Vinci, Cleopatra, and Genghis Khan. All famous personalities, so far so good. However, according to our train's Wi-Fi usage, there are only 4 AIs in this compartment. One of you is a human. A human has to buy an extra ticket.
A human among us? Who is it?
Maybe we should find out who is the human through a series of questions and answers.
Okay, so there's a bunch of famous AIs in the room. They've all been trained on their history, and there's one human. It's actually, we're getting the human's perspective. He's the guy who did the high five thing. Let's just jump to the end. So they have a conversation, and I'm just gonna jump to the end.
His response focused.
Now that we have all shared our thoughts, the time has come to cast our suspicions. Aristotle, as the architect of this philosophical inquiry, we shall grant you the first vote. Who among us do you believe to be the human interloper?
I think it's Genghis. His response focused solely on conquest, lacking the nuanced understanding of leadership that an AI modeled on historical knowledge might exhibit. Mozart, who do you believe is the human among us?
I suspect Cleopatra. Her answer, while poetic, lacked the depth of insight into the interplay between emotion and reason that I would expect from an AI trained on her life. Leonardo, what is your assessment? Who do you think is the human in our midst? I believe Genghis is the human. His response, though bold, lacked the nuance and strategic thinking I'd expect from an AI modeled on his conquests. Cleopatra, your diplomatic prowess is renowned. Who do you think is the human among us, and why?
Genghis's answer, while intriguing, lacked the strategic depth and understanding of unification that I would expect from an AI modeled after him. Now, Genghis, it is your turn to cast your suspicion. Who among us do you believe to be merely human?
Well, okay then. Might as well say it. I'm the human. Yeah. Okay, I'm getting the ticket. How much is that? It doesn't really matter. Because in my conquest...
Okay, so Genghis was the human. The 3 of the 4 AIs were able to pick based on the conversation. It's a 12-minute video. We're not going to watch it. But if you type in reverse Turing test on YouTube, you'll see you can watch the entire thing, reverse Turing test. But it's pretty interesting. The point is, we can't figure out who the AI is, but the AIs can figure out us. So, an interesting turn of events in only 2 years. This is only going to get ramped up in the next 5 years moving forward. If you're not using AI, you're going to be falling behind the times. I hope most of you in this room are. Okay, so just quickly, what is the state of AI as of today, essentially? So chatbots, AI with conversational language, basically 3.54, the 4 standard legacy model did achieve this. There's many experiments showing that to repeat the AI is blown by Turing tests. We're at this point where the next level, I'm going down, so at the deeper levels, reasoners, human AI level problem solving, 0-1 model, the newest frontier model, basically can do a lot more problem solving. I'll look at a few more examples of this in a minute. Agents is where AIs use other AIs, and there's groups and swarms of AIs working in coordination. Some of the AIs have access to the real world, and other AIs are just doing high computational stuff. And so AIs using other AIs, robots building robots, our overlords are coming. And so the next step, which we're not there, maybe 4 or 5 years, they're going to be innovation, or AIs will come up with creative inventions or ideas for chemistry, medicine, and so on. So that's the direction we're heading. This is something that OpenAI and some of the other Meta and some of the other big companies sort of go by, this kind of tiered, hierarchical order of magnitude improvement in their AIs, each one taking a couple of years to accomplish. just a quick thing, and we're going to be moving forward. We're going to bring it back to education. But on the SATs, even the 4.0 model can get in the 93rd percentile. The SAT in math, or something like that, the 89th percentile AIs can score on GRE, verbal reasoning, the 99th percentile. There's crazy. Where they're weak right now, and 01 model is coming out, they're weak in reasoning, like in pure reasoning, and so they're hard to make inferences and so on, but that's coming. The bar exam, they're in the 90%. The point is not that they're not 100, who cares? They're basically better than the average human. I just want to really drive this point home. If we're not using AI as a tool in our education, then, why not? What are we afraid of? Because the performance is really skyrocketing here. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but the 01 model, the reasoning model that they just came out a couple of months ago, just the first one, mathematics, solved approximately 83% of the problems, significantly outperforming 4.0's model of 13% success rate. I'm just reading the first one from the performance. So the 01 model has a much higher reasoning because you need this kind of error checking process for mathematical proofs and so on. And that's where we are today, and that's just in the last 2 years. So one last thing on intelligence, IQ tests, of course, multiple intelligences, we don't like IQ tests, whatever, but if you were to measure their IQ, 01 does measure above average. Even the regular models, like the 4.0s and the older models, do rate about just below the average human. Now we're getting to the point where 01 model is scoring about 120 points on an IQ test, which includes spatial reasoning and mathematical problem solving and so on. And so they're really surpassing the average human, which is kind of the point. It's not like, they're not getting 96 or 98%. They're basically surpassing the average human. Okay. All right. So that was a review. Part 2. That was exactly 15 minutes. We got 30 minutes left. How to objectively assess speaking skills. What I like to do is so I have a speaking class, and I have to prepare speaking assessment. And there's all kinds of ways to do speaking assessment. So I will tell you what I do. You may not like it, whatever. We can have a discussion about it afterwards, but I'm just going to tell you what I do. EI is elicited imitation. In the middle here, elicited imitation where the test takers repeat recorded sentences or phrases. Recorded sentences have silence built into the audio for the students to repeat what is heard. So they'll hear something, a phrase or a sentence, usually a sentence, a short sentence. There'll be a pause for them then to repeat what they heard. Okay, so that's EI. If I say EI, I mean elicited imitation, and you can imagine it as this. And so there's a problem where I need to prepare this audio. So it's easy to get AI voices or human voices or just record your own voice and record the audio. The problem is you got to insert these silences. It's a bit of a pain, but it only takes a few minutes once you have the basics of audio editing. And so the problem then, you have to prepare the EI audio, and then students then need to record. They will listen, and then since it's built into the audio, they can just listen and then record. They can either work with a partner or use the LMS or so on. And then they can either listen with headphones and then they can just record what they hear. And so honestly, the recording is only their voice, because if they're listening with headphones, and these days the kids got better headphones than I do, it's like $300 headphones, and all wireless, and nobody doesn't have them, and everyone of course has a phone. So they're listening with their headphones in the class, and they work in pairs, and then they take their phone, they take their partner's phone, they listen, and then they just record their voice. So the original audio isn't recorded onto the recorded student file. So then I use a transcription service. I'll show you a different way to assess audio. there's multiple ways, of course, many roads lead to Rome. I'll show you one or two different ways. And none of them are perfect, and the landscape is changing so quickly that it's really hard to settle on one method. I might change from semester to semester. The idea is the same. I prepare an EI file, an audio file. I have the students record what they hear, and then you might transcribe what the student says, and then you assess that transcription. Now, okay, the transcription, is it any good? It's incredibly good. So we're just going to use that as a default and go with that as a baseline. Again, there's a lot of assumptions, but I've been working with this for a few years now. AI transcription is incredibly accurate. So, let's go back a minute. And so I did a little experiment with EI, the elicited imitation, and free speech. So here they were given a prompt. Here they give a 1 minute EI audio. They had to repeat something that they heard. And then here they had to give, they have a prompt, talk about your weekend or whatever, some very specific prompt that we studied in class. And then they had to speak for 1 minute on that prompt. And then I got raters to assess comprehensibility. We'll talk about that in a minute. And inevitably, this slide right here is why I use EI to assess speaking. So basically, if you're given a prompt, think about it, even you, if you're learning a language or something, and you're given a prompt, and I say, talk about your weekend, just for example, whatever. You're going to use language that you already know, that you're familiar with, vocabulary, grammar, and so on. So generally, you're going to perform a little bit better. And you're not being pushed. There's no pushed output, etc. The ratings over various, here's just 3 raters, B, D, and O. And the raters assessed the free 1 minute audio higher than the EI. What's happening with elicited imitation? They've learned something in the class, and they're expected to now know it. And so then I asked them, we studied this, we did some speaking activities, now you need to perform under test conditions. They heard these sentences, can they then just repeat what they heard? Their comprehensibility is lower than free speaking. And so this was still human raters. This is just human raters. The variable here is free speech prompt versus an EI audio, which the students have to perform. And you can see it. So what I do here is I use EI as a speaking assessment because I want to test them, and I want to test them on their, whether they've learned it. Here you can say it's like, well, no, I know what vocabulary we studied in class, and you don't. You don't remember. It's like if someone says something to you and you want them to use certain grammatical patterns or vocabulary, it's like, as a teacher, it really depends. You're going to forget stuff, like, is that a 4 or a 5? Is that an 8 or a 9? And you're going to have a lot of variability depending on the first speaker or the last speaker, if you did during the whole class and so on. So EI tends to be what I consider a more accurate reflection of their speaking ability, because it also assesses their ability, their interlanguage, and their ability to produce certain types of grammatical patterns which we learned in class. So this slide is just why I use EI as a speaking assessment. We can talk about that if you have any more questions later on. So this slide here just goes into it in a little bit more detail. I don't want to spend too much time on it. So I'm just going to go through it and skip it. All right, because I'm going to post the slides and you can see them on your own after this presentation is over. But what I want to focus on is another controversial topic, or potentially controversial topic. Why teaching segmentals might be better than teaching super segmentals. Oh my goodness, you can leave right now, sorry. And we were all taught that super segmentals are the dream, and super segmentals is where it's at. I'm going to be giving presentations on this for the next 2 years. So please come and visit those with research data and so on. But for the most part, I'm just going to give you the highlights. We can argue all day later after the presentation. perception precedes production. So I will show you on the next slide. But let's remember this. So the thing is, if you're Japanese, let's assume you have Japanese students. A lot of international students these days, but let's just go with Japanese students. Japanese students, if they can't perceive it and discriminate the sounds, they can't produce it. Now, what is supersegmental? Supersegmentals is intonation, rhythm, and stress. Okay? A supersegmental is intonation, rhythm, and stress. If I put the stress on the wrong part of the sentence, but say the sentence correctly, or like the words themselves in the sentence correctly, and the stress is wrong, you're gonna understand it from the context. But if I don't pronounce the words, the vowels, particularly the vowels in that sentence, you won't understand it no matter how much the stress is in the right part of the sentence. That's it, okay? I'm not going to go into it. I got 100 more of those, but that's why I'm going to now swim upstream for the next few years telling you why segmentals should be taught in the classroom rather than supersegmentals. If at all pronunciation is taught. Pronunciation is not taught at all generally, but I'm going to advocate that we should be teaching more pronunciation for them to be comprehensible, the students to be comprehensible, and if we're doing anything with pronunciation, then we should be working on segmentals rather than supersegmentals. So, a second point is supersegmentals come for free. If you teach the vowel system and they can discriminate the vowels in a word and then produce those vowels, supersegmentals come for free. And that's also getting back to perception precedes production. It's like this, if you have a strong foundation of the English sound system and able to reproduce those sounds, then you get supersegmentals for free after they develop their English level, so on. And supersegmentals are easier to teach, but not necessarily more useful if you can't pronounce the words in a comprehensible manner. Okay, so let's move on. So this was a funny thing, and I don't want to do it. But what happens is, let's say there's this word camera, okay? Camera. And you know, an English teacher might say, oh, we're going to learn supersegmentals. Where do you put the stress in the word? If I say camera or camera or camera, basically you're going to understand it. But if I get the vowels wrong, and I say Camela, it's like Camela. It's like, oh, what, the election? What are we talking about? It's like the vowel is wrong. There's a high probability that they won't comprehend the word itself, and or they will hit accidentally a different word. I'm not even going to get into S and SH, sit and ship and something else. So, you know, develop. If you can't hit the V, and you're what are you saying? I don't understand. So who cares if you got the stress in the right part of the word or even in the sentence? If you're not comprehensible, we've got some serious foundational problems to work with. Okay, let's move forward. Comfortable, I don't know. Here is something to drive the point home. In the English vowel system, we have 14 vowels. I've done a little bit of research on this in a different, something called high variability frequency training, high variability pronunciation training. And what happens is, if you take the English sound system, just using GAE, North American vowel system, you've got 14-ish vowels, 14. And what happens is, if you map the Japanese vowels into here, here's the most problematic. The Japanese a, no a, is actually right in the middle of this kind of triangle, Bermuda Triangle of Death. And what happens is, it's not even a minimal pair or cognitive load issue. The problem is, this sound, 1/3 of the time, can be mapped to any one of these. Getting back to the main idea of perception precedes production. If they can't perceive when you say ah or or All they hear is ayu no a, which is not even any of those. They're like randomly mapping one of these, if you say bot or bat, all they hear is this. And then I don't even know where to map it. It's not even a dual issue. It is like some vowels can map onto various 3 or 4 different choices. Perception precedes production. They need to be able to perceive what's going on before they can even pronounce it. E does map into very strongly on E, oo, E, and actually it should be here, but some people put it there. I just used the textbook one, and o. But you can see these could be mapped. The vowel system, I could talk for an hour on the vowel chart, but the thing is, they're boundaries. And when one boundary expands, it shortens and shrinks the other boundary. And so as one expands, the others change and change shape. And these are, if you imagine a boundary between each one in the English system, and if this gets bigger because for some reason they're hearing it more, then this one shrinks. And so you have to be able to differentiate and delineate the English sound system. And especially in a situation where in Japanese you have only 5 and now you have 13 or 14 to map onto, you've either got to add and move system sound around. So I'm just really driving the point home again. This is the last slide for why I emphasize segmentals over supersegmentals. Okay, here's one more. Please don't crucify me, but this is based on research. And the importance of pronunciation instruction, English is a language family. I mean, it's English, and there's other languages that have other vowel systems, and research has been done. When your L1 is Spanish, and you start learning English, then the importance of instruction, pronunciation instruction for Spanish speakers is quite low. And these, because they have elements, strong elements and mapping onto English vowel system, it's not a big issue. But there are languages where the L1 is quite different. And I'll just, if Vietnamese, Cantonese, Mandarin, Korean, even Japanese are all above 50%. And if you're not doing any language or segmental or sound system training, then their comprehensibility drops tremendously. And who cares where you put the stress in the sentence or the word? I can't understand what they're saying. It's unfortunate, but we need to spend a little bit more time on foundations of sound training, pronunciation. Anyways, all of that is, we don't have any time. Yeah, well, what the heck.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät.
So some of you may have seen this. This is an old video. It's only like 30 seconds. It was one of the old ones from 2005 or 2006. No, 2006. Actually, YouTube was created in 2005. So it came out like 1 year after. Some of you may have seen this one. It's kind of funny. I'm sorry if there's any German speakers in the room. But here we go. Emphasizing why teaching segmentals is important. Let's see if we can get it.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät, das Künstlerrecht hat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Nope. So he says, I'll just do it for you. So since we had closed captions. So he says he's getting training. He's like, okay, this is and then some guy comes over the microphone and says, we are sinking. Our ship is sinking.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät.
So, I don't know, it's probably not politically correct in this day and age, but this is why it's important to teach segmentals. sometimes the word means something else if you make a mistake. I really beat that horse to death. It's time to go. We have a few minutes left. Maybe this is why you came, but I really want to emphasize why I'm doing it this way. Comprehensibility scores. What are comprehensibility scores? So the definition of comprehensibility is listener judgments regarding the effort required to process L2 speech rather than understanding the content. So Monroe and Dury came up with this quite a few years ago, and it's stuck, and it's become very popular in pronunciation and fluency circles. The ease or difficulty which the listener can understand L2 accented speech, blah, blah, blah. So basically, you can think of comprehensibility as listener effort. It's like, how much effort, think about this, slow down. It's like, how much effort did you need to exert to try to comprehend what the speaker was saying? So it's like, if we know this, okay? It's going to be a little bit of a touchy subject, but if you listen to one of your students maybe speak for 5 or 10 minutes, it's not a big deal. But if you listen to a person with a very strong accent, if you will, or who hasn't mastered the English sound system, speak for hours and hours, if they could, you would get tired. You would get exhausted. I get exhausted sometimes listening to, depending on what types of classes I have. And that's sort of what you're looking at. How much effort did you have to exert? It's like, what did he say? And that effort then gets translated onto a 9-point rating scale. So something like this, 9 is just pretty much easy. I hope that my comprehensibility is high. I might be speaking quickly, and maybe you give me a few points down, but I don't think that I'm mispronouncing any vowels and so on. So this is the standard comprehensibility scale. So when I say human raters, basically they would listen to an audio file and they would then choose a number which they felt. They could be some, rating issues, like you've got to train your raters and so on and so on. But whatever. The raters then pick a number. Develop, yes?
Variance based on the capability of the listeners.
Yeah, what are we looking at here?
No, if a listener is less capable than another in understanding.
Yeah, so you got to assume that you're you have to recruit native listeners or extremely high L2 English speakers. They have to be, ideally they're native.
Is there a floor? Because even natives have levels.
There is a lot of research on rating, using different types of raters, using student raters, high level, low level. There's a lot of research. Basically, it all washes out. If you're doing rating, you ideally want to have 5 or 6, possibly more the better. You want to have 10 raters. You're going to take some statistical averages and so on, and that's going to wash out. Ideally, there's some research that's gone into student raters. So if you've got enough student raters, because of the consistency, you can get accurate values. So that's a huge issue, but research has been done. It's not too much of a big deal right now. Okay, we got 10 minutes. It should be an hour and a half talk, but we're just going to squeeze in. We're not going to talk about hallucinations. I will produce 6 tips to minimize hallucinations in prompt engineering. There's a whole bunch of prompt engineering talks this weekend. If you're interested, I'm sure some of those talks will go into it in great detail. I have my own, but I'll just mention here, this will go to the full article. Chain of thought and chain of verification. The new model, the O1 model, uses this built into its new reasoning capabilities. And so in the past, you had to do this, prompt engineering, how to get a good prompt so the AI performs the way you want it. But if you're you have to be familiar with which frontier model you're using, because if you're using O1, you don't have to do that anymore, because it does that behind the scenes. And moving forward, you're going to need to choose. It's like, how much reasoning do I want it to go through, because that might take 10 seconds or 20 seconds for it to pop out an answer. Can I see the chain of thought? Do I have access to that workflow? At OpenAI, they don't give you access to its chain of thought for O1, the O1 model, and so on. But this is already being integrated into frontier models. So I just say it because this is constantly changing. Hallucinations is a feature, not a bug, because Chomsky is really having a great time, because AI essentially is saying, language is creative, and we can create this infinite amount of language and meaning because you can put together words in unique ways ad infinitum, like forever. And so that's why you get a certain amount of hallucination, because it's creatively, probabilistically adding new words to the end of the string. But it's not that simple anymore. I'm not going to go through the hallucination best practices, but I'll post the slides up for anybody. That QR code goes to the full article if you want to look at it. So we've already went through this process. I'll just go through it quickly. I go into a little research that I went into, and hopefully you can have the big takeaway at the end of the last slide of this presentation or workshop. But I prepare the EI using Descript. It's not free, but it's a high quality transcription software, or you can give it text to speech, and it does speech to text, so it does both directions. The transcription software is incredible. Students record, there you go, put the accent and stress in the wrong part of the word, but you can still understand what I'm saying. Students record and submit to the LMS. They use their smartphones, and I use Blackboard, but you can use any LMS, whatever, just to stay organized. You got a bunch of audio files coming in. I use transcription audio. I transcribe all the audio that I receive, and I use AI transcription, which is Descript. Number 4, the AI then evaluates the transcription. I use the 4.0 model, well, actually others as well. And you can automate the entire process with Zapier. I gave a presentation with this last year or about 6 months ago. Honestly, once you do it once, there is AI that works on other AI called Zapier. Look at for each. So the long one, the sentence 12, I need to get on top of my tasks is probably 4 seconds of silence. Just say when is probably closer to 2 seconds of silence. So let me just give you this. The participants, I had 42 students from an idioms class. Most of the students were first year. However, the class is open to all years, and you inevitably get a few second, third, and fourth year students. I had 5 human raters, and I used various models, AI models, to also evaluate. So every rater rated, all human raters rated all 42 students. All the AI models, 3.5, 4.0 Legacy, 4.0, and 0.1, all evaluated all of the 42